Hello, I'm Alistair Aitcheson and welcome to the Indiecade Festival. I'm here interviewing the creators of the games that reach beyond the screen, the games that are only playable in real life or use unusual custom-made controllers. With me today is Harper Ferry, creator of the Sentient Severed Arm. Harper, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And first off, a big congratulations. The Sentient Severed Arm picked up the Developer's Choice Award.
Yeah,
So,
I was absolutely shocked by that,
well,
and I'm floored.
I've been reading all about it. I unfortunately haven't had a chance to have a go myself yet, but I'm looking forward to giving it a whirl with a couple of friends. And I think that's one of the
Beautiful.
exciting things about this kind of work. I mean, maybe to kick off, would you like to describe what the Sentient Severed Arm is?
Yeah, so the Sentient Severed Arm is a LARP, live action role playing game slash party game slash tabletop role playing game, and at the same time, it doesn't really fit super comfortably into any of those categories. The way that the game is played, it is an 8-page PDF. And the way that it's played is that one player takes on the role of the titular sentient severed arm, and they're responsible for essentially hiding the rest of their body except for their arm. I built a custom table with a big hole in it, which I'll be honest looks a bit perverted, but is there just so that you can kind of like stick your arm out, and then all of the other players, which could be anywhere from 2 to 30 people, have the ability then to start gathering around this arm. They take on the roles of necromancers and alchemists, who are supposed to be sort of opposite doubles of each other. And they have a series of moves that they're carrying out throughout the game that then create these really unpredictable interactions between them and the arm and between each other. And some of those moves are things like overstate your greatness or say something ominous about your backstory or goals. And those are very open-ended prompts, right? You don't do any character creation before that. The character is emergent in that moment, and the game can be 20 minutes, it can be 40 minutes. It's a rare game that you can really just set up and play in a very short amount of time. And that's because it doesn't have any roadmap attached to it. There's no built-in story, there's no clear outcomes that you're trying to work toward. You're just kind of messing around for a period of time and seeing where that takes you.
And I think that's something that, like I was saying, that I'm quite keen to play it with my friends. And it's like, it's exciting to have something like that for something that, it is a LARP and it is, that you are kind of role playing it. But, reading through the PDF, there's not a great many things to prepare or wrap your head around.
No.
I guess it just takes the courage of one person to crawl under a table and stick their arm up and out.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think that the game is so technically simple. And in contrast to, let's say, like a video game, like a first person shooter, it's so ridiculously simple. It's literally just a PDF with some suggestions. But the buy in required to really get the experience out of the game sort of requires some courage from at least one person, um, and really everybody to sign on to something without knowing where it goes.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, having a look at the video footage that you sent over for it, the table is covered in objects. There's things
Yes.
on there, and the arm can kind of reach out for them. What do these objects do?
So the idea of the objects is that in the setup of the game, each one of these examiners can bring objects to the table, and before the game ever starts, the arm player gets to set some boundaries for them. So one of them that I mentioned in the text is like, you could say, "Oh, sure, you can use this permanent marker on me, but don't actually write on me," or you can poke me a little bit with this pencil, but don't actually hurt me. And in that way, there's a really, uh, I think, intuitive set of safety procedures that are involved there, and the game also makes it very clear. This is a game that can be paused at anytime by any player for any reason. And so they're bringing these objects, and then those just become things that, like, number one, the arm can interact with, and that's kind of fun because you don't know what's going on up there. But also, there are things that when a player is feeling stuck, if the moves for the game aren't giving them what they need, they can then pick up, for instance, a broom handle and just start dusting off the arm, or they can. I think one of the things I mentioned in the text is like a clove of garlic is a potential examination tool. You break it up, you could rub garlic all over their arm, and that's just like a thing that you can do.
Yeah.
And is there a point to it? I don't know. You're the examiner, you're the alchemist, you're the necromancer. That's really up to you to decide what you're trying to accomplish when you do that.
Yes.
And so they aren't the objects are all sort of arrayed there, almost like a set of variable moves. So each player has a set of moves that their character is supposed to be able to act out. But then having these objects on the table as toys, they kind of materially present their own moves. And what's cool about this is that I haven't told the players what objects they should bring. And so the moves that are embedded in these objects, like say somebody could say, oh, I have this keychain with a labubu. That labubu has specific moves attached to it that are about how it is materially existing in the world, what it's made out of, how it's shaped, what it feels like when you touch it to your skin. Those are all things like affordances in that object that I couldn't have predicted.
Yes.
And those affordances present themselves as things that the players can then do.
Yes.
And those are just wildly varied.
And so, for example, the player playing the arm might decide when they feel something soft, the arm might get enraged or something like that. Or
so in the video that I made, I brought a pump for an air mattress.
Right.
Like this little weird box, and it just goes.
Yeah.
And I decided midway through playing that game that the arm really hated that thing.
Right.
And so, like, we started having all these interactions where the players would be like, oh, I'm going to turn this thing on because I want to make the arm mad. And I would grab it, throw it across the room, and then they'd go pick it up and they'd start messing with it again. Because this interaction is like, you don't know what's going to happen. And that ambiguity is actually so fun.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting. You just mentioned the arm throwing something across the room because, my first thought seeing a player, playing at being an arm is that they, that is quite a limited vocabulary that you have as an arm. But I guess within that, you do have quite a rich space, but you have to find it. So, finding that verb of, I can throw something across the room, that's not normally something you'd use in your vocabulary in daily life, but now it becomes, it takes on a new meaning.
That the constraints in the game are there specifically to try to push players to do stuff that they wouldn't do in their daily life. I don't hide under a table most days, thankfully. I do live in LA, so sometimes things start shaking and I have to dive under something. But that's not a part of my daily life. And trying to communicate without words isn't really a part of my daily life. So on the one hand, the term that I like to use is deviant scaffolds. I think a lot of my games are deviant scaffolds, which is to say they're structures that you can kind of climb on and follow in order to reach places that you wouldn't be able to reach otherwise, ideally safely.
Yes.
And so the other flip side of how that rule works is that another thing that I really focus on in a lot of my games are questions of ambiguity, bodily autonomy, and subaltern experience, right? And so you have this arm who's being experimented on by these authorities. And at the same time, the arm is fundamentally unable to communicate with these authorities. And that's not just because of who the arm is, it's also because of the posture that these authorities have toward the arm. They're fundamentally more concerned with their own goals than they are with the experience of the arm. And so the arm is really meant to represent a sort of queer perspective, an outsider, subaltern perspective, anyone who really feels like they have a lot to say. They have a rich inner experience, and the world around them compels them to keep that hidden or purposely misunderstands what that experience is. And so that's why at the end of the game, there's a whole process where the ARM player gets to decide actually whether they want to clarify anything that happened, because
Right.
the ARM has these mysteries attached
Yeah.
to it that they kind of get to choose. But I'm very clear that the ARM doesn't have to know the answers to those mysteries.
Mm.
Those can be emergent during the game, or they can be things that never emerge. The ARM might not know these things about itself.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important part of it. That idea of like grasping around and groping around and not knowing what's going on, and not knowing how to communicate, not knowing how things are going to be received. That's a fundamentally human experience.
Yes.
And it's really one that I think is very important to represent in games. And I think that there's something about the way that most game design works, which is really aimed at eliminating ambiguity
Mm.
and making things clear and making things technical and minimizing friction. This game does the opposite. The friction is the fun.
Yes. That's, I mean, it's the so the arm, like under the table. I guess it's interesting that because the arm does, yes, they are very limited. They are very limited. They cannot fully communicate the way that they would want to, the way that feels natural to them. I guess, I was thinking about, like, instinctively, if I was to play this game, I would want to be the arm. That's like my number one. And I don't know if that's a sort of common for most people to want to be the arm, but for me, and I think about why is that, and what sprung to mind was under the table, you feel kind of safe. You can't do anything wrong when you're under the table. And so I think there is something kind of interesting in there's a vulnerability, but there's also an element of like protection or something in there. Obviously, you have to be kind of awkwardly placed while you do it, but
well, I think that the game actually, I'm going to toot my own horn. I
yeah.
think that the game does a pretty good job of giving each player that kind of alibi. Because if you look at the moves for instance, the necromancer or the alchemist, they're actually both also concerned with being specifically overstating your greatness, for instance.
Right.
Like, you are supposed to be doing something wrong. Other examiners are supposed to be telling you that you're doing something wrong. One of the moves they have is criticize an experiment by another examiner.
Yeah.
So you actually have this alibi where no matter what you do, somebody's going to be telling you you're doing it wrong. There is no right way to do it. And you're specifically set up with these rivals who are going to tell you you're doing it all wrong. And that's part of the point. It creates an alibi for each player to do things that actually don't make a lot of sense and to be foolish.
Yes. And I guess because, you've got the rules effectively as your scaffold, as you said, that you can't be too self-conscious about what you're doing because, you're just holding onto the scaffold. You are, you are following along with the instructions, and trusting in the game.
And at the end of the day, if that doesn't work, you can blame me.
So I'm interested that there's two outside of the arm. There's these two roles. There's the necromancers and the alchemists. What's the difference between the necromancers and the alchemists?
The necromancers and the alchemists have actually very few differences, and that is on purpose. Really, what I was trying to get at in creating this game was kind of a very soft, very light critique of medical authority. And I think that when people hear the phrase necromancers, they instantly go, oh, this is an evil person.
Right.
They're obsessed with death and they're obsessed with control, right? And that's kind of what the necromancer is about. It's what it says on the package. Then you have the alchemist. And when we think about alchemists, they're sort of scientists, they're sort of doctors. They're looking at humors and they're looking at how things interact. And there's a kind of whereas necromancers are sort of hiding out in the dark. You'll find them in the graveyard at night or in a mausoleum or whatever. Whereas alchemists, you find them in the king's court. You find them having a business in the middle of town, right? So, but then you look at what their moves are, and their moves are practically the same. And whereas the necromancer is really interested in how can I compel souls? How can I control what souls do? What does a soul do? How is it connected to the body? You kind of see like the average person who's been engaging with Western media sees those things and is like, okay, cool, that's evil. And what I wanted to do by creating a mirror version of that in The Alchemist was to really highlight that the way that medical authority functions is equally evil. The idea of thinking about how can we control the body?
Yeah.
That's great if it's your body, but if it's somebody else's body, that's evil, right?
Yes.
And I think about things like Rene Descartes torturing dogs for medical science and believing these people can't feel pain. I'm thinking about the early advances in gynecology and how those were doctors acting on, in particular, this one Black American woman and performing all of these horrific experiments on her with the idea that she couldn't feel pain. And that anything that she had to say was irrelevant. So she has the exact same subaltern position as the arm, but in history, it is not a game.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important. And I think that the game gives you a way to play through that interaction in a way that is fun and safe, while also still actually really ideally, I mean, I can't promise this happens in every game, but my goal as a designer was that the Alchemist players or the Necromancer players would start to see the similarity between these two roles and start to wonder for themselves, is this authority over the body, is this relationship to the body and what we can force it to do, is that actually a healthy relationship? And I don't think that it is. And so that was part of what I was trying to drive at with this game.
Yes. And I guess because they are, you know, so busy bickering amongst themselves, you know, trying to one up each other, prove each other wrong and things like that, they kind of don't notice that this arm is a being with thoughts and feelings and
right. They're not necessarily concerned with whether the arm is its own being or whether it's part of a leftover of another person, for instance. What is its personhood actually isn't one of the mysteries of that the alchemists and necromancers are concerned with. They're looking for control, they're looking for power, and they're looking to tempt other examiners with their control and power.
Right. So, I mean, the arm is it's less flesh, it's less human, it's a mechanism, or at least that's how they see it. It's a mechanism for them
it's a
to
MacGuffin.
get status or whatever. And and I guess to be a human MacGuffin is quite a harrowing experience to live through.
Yeah. And so as a trans woman in the United States, like, I would imagine most people could probably guess how that's immediately relatable to my position, right? Like, trans women are sort of this object that is paraded around as a, like, hey, how can we use this thing to our advantage? You know, even the people who are supposedly on our side, there's this question of, hey, does our support or non-support of this thing hurt us in a more public way? And so that was part of what you see in the alchemists and necromancers, that necromancers seek secret power and alchemists seek public power.
Right.
Alchemists are detached from their subjects, whereas necromancers are passionate about them. And neither of those is necessarily a healthy interaction, but they are different, even if they are mirrored.
Yes. I find it, you know, like, is the experience of players, is it typically, you know, one of sort of, you know, deep thought, high emotions and things like that? Or, you know, does it become quite, you know, silly and playful? Or does that sort of vary from group to group?
I think it varies. I think it varies actually throughout a given game.
Right.
One of my favorite moments in the video that I made for my Indiecade submission, there's this great moment. You can see me underneath the table with my arm out, and you can hear one of the players saying, if this thing is sentient, like, is it alive or is this some kind of weird death twitch? And there's a moment where you're like, whoa, that's kind of deep. And then the next thing you hear is a slide whistle going, And the combination is just
Yes.
like so perfectly what I wanted out of the game. I
Yeah.
really wanted players to be like, wait, what does it mean to be alive or dead? What even is that?
Yes.
Um, what is a soul? Like, does moving around mean that you have a soul or a spirit? That's an open question in a lot of world traditions, you know?
Yes.
And I wanted people to get into that headspace and then also be in the headspace of like, I'm peeling this weird glue off of your skin, and that's just like, it's a great sensation, it's fun, it's silly. And my experience playing the game is that both of those things are happening damn near at the same time.
Mm. And I guess it's possible for both of these, that having one, one feeling, the feeling of fun and absurdity, and the feel of kind of, terror or discomfort, that they can be experienced at the same time. That they are not, you know, you you can have both at the same. They're not mutually exclusive. I mean, it makes me think. We were speaking earlier, just before we started filming, about clowns, which is a shared interest between us, and it's like when you're talking about the absurdity of that situation where someone's thinking talking real deeply about, is this dust the death switch, and then you get a slide whistle, you know that makes me think of Dark Clown. That makes me think of, because Clown can go into some very dark areas, and absurdity can be a way into some very interesting subject matter.
Yeah, and I'm not really interested in creating a horror game
Mm.
out of this, but I think about, for instance, with clowns, like the classic clown bit in my mind is like there's a clown and there's a policeman, right?
Right.
And those are kind of the opposite forces. And you're like, that's a funny situation. You have this figure who is really embodying the idea of law and order and regularity and the status quo. And then you have this character who's just incapable of that. And that's a funny situation. That is
Yes.
an absurd situation. It is also a terrifying one if you have ever interacted with police.
Mm.
If you cannot do what they demand of you, that is a horrifying experience.
Yes.
And that is also built into the game,
Yes.
where you're being tasked with answering these questions by these authorities who have every power over you, and you can't really answer them.
Yes. Yes. That is. Yeah. I mean, it's it's the word Kafkaesque. Is that what I'm looking for? There's a. Yeah. I another just on the clown note for me. Yeah, and I think everyone who's done clowning has done it with a different teacher and taken different things from it. But I went into clowning myself from a background of having been a game developer and a game designer. So what I saw in clown was this vehicle for play, but also seeing a lot of this idea of setting up rules. And in clown improvisations. Oh, it sounds like, is that a
One note. One note. My game has no rules.
right?
Rules come from
Oh,
rules come from rulers. My game
yes,
has procedures.
right.
And the difference is you can not follow those procedures with no consequences. If you break a
Yes,
rule, there are consequences.
right. Interesting. So I was thinking more like the moves on the characters, and it's interesting because when I read through the PDF, my thought was, oh, these are the set of things that a necromancer can do. And of course, the necromancer is free to do anything else
Anything.
that's not on them, and they can do
Yeah.
whatever they like.
Those are there as a menu for when you have run out of ideas, right? If
Yes,
you're like, I feel awkward, I don't know what to do, you look down at
yes,
the sheet and it says, perform an experiment to probe an alchemical mystery. And you're like, I don't know what that is. So I'm going to move down to the next one. It says, criticize another examiner. You're like watching somebody else do it. And let's say they're tickling the arm. And you go, tickling the arm will accomplish nothing. You have to make it feel pain, or you have to make it do what you want. And then those interactions create the characters,
yes,
but you're not stuck doing those things. They're just there for when you are stuck.
yes. I see. I see. That's yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, maybe rules wasn't the word I was looking for then, or maybe
It's a
but it's
personal act that I'm
yeah,
constantly grinding, but
yeah. But I mean, even like So within clown, I mean, I like to think of them as rules when I'm, doing clown, because that makes them all the more delicious when you break them. Um,
Right.
the idea, like, um, very often, a clown scene might be, two clowns are playing the roles of the elements. One of you is wind, one of you is fire, one of you is water, and then, when the teacher claps her hands, two elements look at each other and instantly fall in love. Um, and then you play out what happens from there, and sort of something like that. There is that sense of, you know, this sequence of events causes an interesting set of interactions to happen, but doesn't
Right.
define what they are. But it is an interesting distinction, because in my head, I call those rules. And like, really what they are is prompts. They are invitations. They are
Right. Right.
provocations.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, there probably are places where rules are necessary in games.
Mm.
I'm a wingnut. I tend to chafe against authority in any
Mm.
form. So I tend to want to phrase things in terms of procedures and prompts and suggestions. Really, what my game
Yes.
is just a bunch of suggestions. And you can take or leave those. I think the game is better if you're following those suggestions, but you don't have to be only doing those things, right? There's a whole world of experience that I could not possibly try to predict, right? If players, for instance, are bringing all of these pieces to the table, the props themselves, but also the things that they're bringing in their minds, those aren't things I can predict.
Mm.
And I would rather be open to those things and let the game be a spontaneous, exploding thing of interactions that nobody would have predicted than to try to curtail everything down to this highly curated experience that would probably become kind of boring.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I said, you mentioned, like, and you have mentioned it in this conversation already, and also you talked about it in your submission. Is that, safety, comfort, and consent are very important to you. I was wondering if you could maybe tell me a bit about, yeah, what were the decisions that you made to account for that side of it?
I really believe in safety tools in games. I think there is unfortunately somewhat of a tendency to want to go with a kind of one size fits all
Mm.
kind of safety tool. So, for instance, you see like the X card in so many role playing games, and the X card is a great invention. It is a great tool, um, but I tend to really respond to games that have their own bespoke sort of processes for navigating those things,
Mm.
and that's because different situations are different. Different negotiations need to be had, right? Um, for instance, the arm might not always know where the X card is to tap it.
Yes.
And instead, I think, well, number one, the game on its themes is fundamentally concerned with this question of consent, right? When we
Mm.
have this subaltern character being experimented on, we have this relationship of authority to the body. That is fundamentally a conversation about consent.
Yes.
So to have that game and not also have pretty robust guidelines for how to have those interactions would be kind of self-defeating, or
Yes.
hypocritical even. And so I really felt it was important to create a lot of space, especially because, like we were saying, being the arm is a little bit scary. You have the protection of being under the table, but everything above the table is Marina Abramovic, right? Like
Yes.
you're at everyone's mercy.
Yes.
And so in order to empower people to take that step, and in order for the examiners to feel comfortable interacting with the arm, because that's the flip side of the consent negotiation of the arm player saying, you can pull on my hairs, but don't rip any out, right?
Yeah.
That conversation means that the examiners are now comfortable pulling the hair when they might not have
Yes.
been before. It
Yes.
actually opens up play space because ideally you're playing with people who are considerate of the arm player to begin with. right?
Yes.
And so if the ARM player is then actually giving people permission to do this, but maybe not this, then that elucidates the whole experience and makes every single player more comfortable participating actively. And I think that the game really wouldn't work without that.
Yeah.
And so, and then in addition to that, having it really be stated, timer be damned. If anyone wants to pause the game for any reason, they should just do that. And
Yeah.
that's fine. It's really not a big deal. It's a 15 to 45-minute game. Compare that to like a 5-hour session of Dungeons and Dragons. You have time to pause and go to the bathroom. It's
Yes.
okay. And if you are getting caught up in your feelings about something, that's okay. You can pause the game. And as a matter of fact, if you're the ARM, you actually have the ability to wither and die when you get tired of what's going on. You can just wither and die, and then your next move is dramatically reanimate. But you don't have to do that, right?
Yes.
And as a player, as a examiner, both of the alchemists and necromancers have the ability to end the game at any time by just choosing to take the arm.
Right.
They've decided, to hell with all the rest of this. This thing is mine now. I'm going to take it, and that ends the game. And that's in addition to being able to pause at any time. It's really important to me that the players are the people in charge of the game. And that's why I'm not talking about rules, right?
Yeah.
It's fundamentally really important to me that the players are the ones with the agency, all of them. And that doesn't have to be equal agency, but everyone should have enough agency to be able to put a stop to the game, to put a stop to any specific thing that is happening, and to talk about things. And my game is really explicit about allowing that, and it's really important to me. And if I didn't have that, it would really undercut everything else about the game, both on the terms of like, can you play it and have fun, and in terms of, are those thematic elements coming through?
It's a really interesting point that you made there about how having these safety tools, having this, the consent up front, it means it frees people up to be more confident, to be more ambitious with how they interact with it, because they know it's been laid out on the table what is okay, what is welcome in this space. And I think that's a really good and memorable point, that this isn't, safety and consent are not about restrictions. They create opportunities, because
Right.
Acting as someone, who is considerate of other people, now that you know what you don't have to worry about, then you can kind of play more freely and kind of give yourself over to the game more.
Exactly. Yeah. And I like, comfort is enabling. It's not a restriction. I think that you often see in a lot of situations this tendency to say like, your need for comfort is going to get in the way of the game. And that sucks.
Yes.
It's not a very fun way to play. And, maybe in sports, you're really pushing yourself, but every sports player should feel safe,
Yes.
even if they're pushing themselves. And I just think that, I don't know, it's really important to me.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. So the thing that I wanted to ask about, how many, like, I guess, what was the process of like developing this game like? Did it go through a lot of iterations to find the version of it that worked best, or?
Not really. It's a game that I think a lot of the game is in the basic premise. And the basic premise being, you have people experimenting on an arm, and that there's two different kinds of experimenters who are meant to be these opposites. That idea of the like alchemist versus necromancer mirrored roles was one of the first things. Like the first idea was like, oh, what if you put your arm over a table and people fuck with it? And sorry about my language. People mess with it. And that was the first idea. And then immediately I thought to myself, all of my games really need to mean something to me. And an easy way to do that is to think about who is examining this arm and what they want out of it. And like I said, it's a consistent thing throughout a lot of my games to kind of look at this idea of authority in particular, subaltern experience and deviancy and embodiment. And so I wanted to bring all those things into the game. And once you have the arm, the embodiment is there. And so you start to think about how does that relate to these other ingredients. And from there, I mean, there was some iteration, but the game is simple enough that, thinking about like, okay, I need the examiners. Number one, I wanted to have a game that I like role-playing games. I find it troubling that it's like basically impossible to play most of them with more than 5 people. And most party games don't really offer the kind of role-playing experience that you would get out of a role-playing game.
Yeah.
And so, and most LARPs tend to be very pre-written.
Right.
Pre-written, pre-generated characters, pre-written plot points, et cetera, and I didn't want that. Because for one thing, it's too much work to write. So I knew that I wanted just like some really quick sort of suggestion kind of things for players to be able to interact with. And I needed to find a way for 2 to 30 people to not be bored and to not be, like that's a lot of people to crowd around a table, right? Yeah. So the idea specifically was that you're also going off on the side and you're forming these little pockets and you're colluding with each other and you're making deals. You're trying to, what is the word that I use? It's like tempt or threaten another examiner with the promise of power. Right. And so like at the same time that, maybe 3 or 4 people are messing with the arm, you're pulling a few people off to the side and we're having a side conversation about like, okay, like let's try this and this. That person over there doesn't know what they're doing. If you join my side, I'll give you this. And none of that goes anywhere, right? Yeah. Like at the end of the game, you're not following through on these promises you've made, right? Yeah. But the promises are still driving the action and they're allowing you to interact without the arm. Yes. While other people get to interact with the arm. And so I wanted the moves to be open enough that they didn't all fully revolve around the arm. And so actually, if you look at the moves for the alchemists and necromancers, they're more concerned with the other examiners than they are with the arm. Yes. And that was explicitly to make it more fun for more people.
Yes. And I can imagine that. I mean, that creates a very interesting atmosphere around this arm because I can picture it, with 2 people examining this one arm and your kind of, the arm is very much the center of attention and things like that. And the arm is probably going to be able to hear everything that's going on. When you've got 30 people and you've got 10 different bubbles of conversation going around in the place. And there could be all kinds of stuff happening to this arm, which is disconnected. That, one person might be rubbing the arm with the Labubu for one reason, and another person, 5 minutes later would do the exact same thing for a totally different reason, and it plays all into their story very differently, but for the arm, it's all the same for the arm.
There's a really excellent game that I was a little bit inspired by in this sense called Mobile Suit Zero Firebrands. It's by D. Vincent and McGay Baker. And one of the things that's really beautiful about this game is it's basically a bunch of like little vignette scenes that have like kind of modular scripts that you choose pieces of and go back and forth. But before you do any of those, each character is meant to be playing out these solitaire scenes where it's just your character, you're responding to a quick prompt and you move on. But kind of like minuscule rule in that game that I think is really beautiful is you can do a solitaire scene by yourself in your head on someone else's turn. If you're bored, just do a solitaire scene. And you have this private experience where like they're working on the shared story of the world. And so are you, but you're not sharing all of it immediately. that's for you. It's filling in your backstory. Like if I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons and we're in the middle of a fight and we're all moving the pieces around, rolling the dice, and then in the back of my head, I'm like, this is just like that time when my character was 14 and they were doing this or that. That doesn't have to enter the full game, but it is my experience. It's a
Yes.
private experience and it's enriching the game. It's adding more depth, more context. It's helping me decide who my character is and how they're going to act in the future. But it's actually kind of corollary to the game. It's not in it. And I really wanted to create an experience where people could be having these kind of private or semi-private moments in the game that not everybody experiences. And that way, not everyone has to be doing the same thing. Not everyone has to have the same experience. And when the game ends, you can have a whole other set of conversations just filling everyone in. While you were over there doing that, me and Steve were planning to take the arm and we were pretty sure we were going to kill you. And like, that's fun. The player afterward goes, oh my God, I had no idea that was happening. I had no idea I was being plotted against. And then you can kind of compare notes or not. Or you can
Yes.
sit there and be like, there was so much that I missed. What was happening? And both of those experiences are true to daily life, right? Like sometimes
Yes.
you're like, oh, I just found out, Samantha was talking behind my back. She was saying all these mean things about me. That's an experience that happens to all of us. And it also happens to all of us that like you're just kind of left wondering what happened. Like, oh,
Yes.
I saw all these things move, but I don't understand the animus behind it. And I think those are both really fun experiences. Like I said, fundamentally, this is a game about embracing ambiguity in a way that every other game shunts it aside.
Yes. Yes. I really love that. That's a really nice sentiment. And I'd say, like, yeah. So I've
And
been,
especially because interiority, right,
mm,
is like such a part of the game.
yeah.
The idea that the arm is having this experience that no one else
Yes.
understands is actually mirrored by the idea that you're all having these experiences that are partial and private. And I think that that's a really cool part of the interaction.
Yeah. I guess in many ways, we're all the arm. It's only one of us who knows they're the arm. One person is immediately aware that they're the arm, but in some ways, yeah, we're all kind of arm like.
Right. Like the experience of the arm is meant to be relatable, right?
Mm,
Like, and that fundamentally means that it's somewhat relatable to the experience of the examiners too.
yeah. So I'd like to just ask about your other work because I've been looking through your itch.io and there's a real kind of smorgasbord of uh, exciting and interesting ideas going on there. And I mean, could you tell us about your kind of broader body of work?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been making games for about a year and 9 months. I think
Mm-hmm.
I released my first game in March 15th of 2023. And um, that game is a map making game. It's a hack of Avery Alder's Quiet Year
Mm-hmm.
and a hack of this lesser known game called War in the Year 3000. And the idea of that is that you're taking on the role of rioters in the middle of a single night of rioting, and you're kind of mapping out what's happening. But the real key is I get frustrated sometimes with political games because I feel like they create this idea of political change that doesn't really track with how I believe change happens in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, you might see a Blades in the Dark hack that says, here's how your crew can become the revolutionary force that overthrows blah, blah, blah. And that's cool. But I don't think that's how political change works.
Mm.
And so I wanted to make a game where you do stuff, you take actions, you're answering these prompts, you're taking action in the world, but then one player gets to ask you, like you're being asked these critical questions afterward, right? You're like, oh, my character, like these characters smashed the window of the Nike store and set it on fire, and then you roll the dice, and the dice tell you whether you're getting asked positive questions, critical questions, or both. And the positive questions might be things like, how did this make the whole group safer? Like, say maybe all the police had to rush over and deal with this fire, and so they're not paying attention to the crowd. Or the question could be, how did this make the whole group less safe? And you might say, this escalated the whole situation. They brought more police in, and the tone of violence changed, right? So you're the whole time you're acting, you're asking all of these critical questions about, in real life, how would this change the situation? I want to be honest about it because I want to have games that are looking at how can we really create change, that not only change, but the change that we want, which means we have to think really hard about what possible consequences there are to all kinds of material questions, from where is traffic really bottlenecked to what happens when somebody engages in violence in a public place. These are really important questions for how change can take place in a real situation. So I put that game out, and I'm still really happy with it. I'm working on a version 2 to come out this year. And so then I made this game called Falling Objects, which is a GM-less game that is all about a relentless conspiracy to kill the Emperor. And it's all about, like, fundamentally, you will succeed. At the end of the game, the conspiracy will be successful and the Emperor will be killed. But each time you're making moves, you're taking on costs, and you're willingly accepting those costs. And at the end of the game, you're meant to ask yourself, was it worth these costs? And the players who died are not allowed to answer that question. So there's a survivor's bias literally written into the game about, the costs of engaging in this kind of I don't want to say revolutionary, but let's say partisan behavior. And let's see, what else have we got here? I was making some notes earlier about some of these. Oh, right. So I have a game called Chamonix, Facing the Monster, which is based on Frankenstein, but also based on a piece of performance art by the academic Susan Stryker, which is about performing transgender rage. And it's all about conceptualizing this relationship of, actually, pedantry aside, Frankenstein was the monster. The doctor was the monster. And this game is about the creature confronting their creator, and their creator basically meeting them with all of these excuses. The excuses fall under different categories. They can be deflections, they can be justifications, or they can be attacks. And you write out what the creator said to you, and then you rip it up. You shred their excuses, and you take another step closer to them. And at the end of the game, you have the same kind of ambiguity that you have in the Arm, which is that you are explicitly forbidden from narrating whether that confrontation ends in violence or not. And that is meant to be an open question for the players to talk about after the game has ended. And that, for me, I didn't realize when I was writing that game. It was another thing I was thinking about, medical power and anti-trans feminists and how they interact with one another. And I made the whole game. I wrote it all out. And then I looked at it again and I was like, wow, I hope my mom never sees this, because the whole thing is about these, confronting your creator. And every single one of the justifications that I wrote in there for the creator to offer you are things that people's parents say to them, about how you've turned out. Well, that wasn't my fault. Well, it was actually really important that I did this, so I'm going to justify my behavior. Or, all of these different things that people's parents say to deflect responsibility for how they've impacted their own children. And so that game is very similar, I think, in terms of its relationship to authority and to the body and being able to communicate or not communicate, and is very much in line with the Arm in that way. And likewise, I have a game called Processing. And the idea of processing, it's a single page. You write these, like, kind of accusational questions all over your body, your naked body. And the idea is that you are doing this before you're being examined by someone. That person could be a doctor, that person could be a police officer, that person could be a romantic partner. You're writing these questions on your body, and as you're revealing them, you have questions that are like, what do you plan to do to me? Or what kind of inhuman creature do you think I am? What kind of secrets do you think that I have? And the game is pretty explicit. Playing this game could be dangerous, right? Like if you're arrested,
yes,
and you're being strip searched, and you have all these weird questions on your body that are like, if they find out what I did, what are they going to do to me?
Yes. So I read this.
It's dangerous.
Yes, I read this before we started speaking. So the examiner is not a player. They are not someone playing a role.
They're not a willing player.
Yes, yes. So
they could be. They could be, right? You could tell your partner, "Hey, let's do this weird thing tonight. Yes. I want to have this weird kind of sexy encounter that is like very strange," and they could be a willing player. Yes. Or I specifically mentioned in the game, like, you can play this game. I think it's in there. You can play this game if you never want to be invited back to your doctor's office.
Yes.
Right. Like, I just think that's such a like. Jason Morningstar, who is a game designer I like a lot, he uses the phrase "designable surfaces."
Right.
And day-to-day life is a designable surface. Yes. And that's really what I wanted to get at with processing is you can play with these power dynamics, and in the Sentient Severed Arm, you're doing that with your friends.
Yes.
And you can also go out in the world and do that. Yes. And processing presents to you a way that you can do that. And to be honest, I really don't intend for anyone to play that game.
Yeah.
But in thinking about, wow, that's a thing that I could go out and do, it fundamentally changes your orientation towards public space and towards these kinds of authoritarian interactions with your body. Yes. And you can say, I'm going to make this a game.
Yeah.
You don't have to like it.
Yes.
But, like, I'm here. It's my body.
Yeah.
I can put what I want on it. And I have found that game is really, even just thinking about that game for me is very generative and thinking about how to go about doing other things. And I think that so then I have this other game called The Reign of the Wretched Buffon.
Right.
And do you know much about Buffon clownery?
I have done some Buffon and enjoyed it a lot, but I guess for the audience it's probably worth
the idea that I had is that Buffons are a particular kind of clown who kind of specialize in the grotesque and in being grotesque and in representing grotesquerie, and all of the ideas and embodiments that are rejected by society are picked up by the Buffon and really embodied. Incidentally, the word Buffon is the root of the word buffoon, which is where we get clown. It actually comes from buffo, which means to puff out your cheeks.
Oh.
Which is where we get clowning. So that's fun. But the idea behind this game is that you have this sort of festival that happens when people aren't expecting it.
Yeah.
And then all of society's weirdos and outcasts descend upon the world, and they upend every societal rule. All of society is inverted. And if you're a weird person, you become stranger. If you were a normal person, you start to become weird, and the game is explicit. Another normal person just takes your place. And it's all about like the freakishness and the deviancy and like bringing that into society and making them deal with it, right? Which is the idea behind Buffon clowns. Yes. And I wanted to kind of represent that in a like weird, powered by the apocalypse mini module. And then likewise, the last game I'm going to touch on is I have a zine game called Pursuit. Mm-hmm. And the way that Pursuit works, the first page says, I am a deviant, desperate to live, and you are the homophobic robot dogs that will tear me apart if I should ever seek comfort. And you play through, just a few short pages, and the idea is that you're doing these back and forths about the dogs getting you to a point where you're about to die, and you escape over and over and over again. And then the game says at the end, one of us is going to break down eventually. It's not going to be me. Watch out. And one of the things that I really, really like about this game is that it has this you and I built into the text.
Yeah.
And when you hand someone that game, you are telling them, I'm the deviant, you are the homophobic robot dogs. And there is really not a lot you can do about that as the player unless you're handing the game to somebody else, in which case you have become the deviant and that person is now the homophobic robot dogs. And so there's this positionality that I think is really important, because in society, if you are not stepping forward, you are part of the pack of homophobic robot dogs that is tearing people limb from limb.
Yes.
And unless you are taking action to put something else forward, you're a part of that pack.
Yes.
And fundamentally in the game, it was really important to me that, like, it's a very dark kind of game. Like, the art is kind of foreboding. And you know, you're being relentlessly hunted by this pack of dogs. I wrote this specifically in response to wave upon wave of anti-trans legislation in the United States. And it feels, for trans people, like we're being pursued by a pack of relentless dogs who are going to rip us apart if they get the chance. And fundamentally, at the end of the game, that position is reversed. It says, I'm not going to be the one that goes down. You are. I'm not giving up. And some of us have gone down, right? Some of us have been killed. Some of us have been maimed. Some of us have been removed from public life by being incarcerated or by having our stories shunted out of the public sphere. And fundamentally, this game says, no, that's not going to be the arrangement of things. We are not going to accept that. You are the one who needs to watch out. You are going to be the one who breaks down first, and we are going to win this. And so it's very dark, but at the same time, it's sort of relentlessly hopeful.
Yeah.
And every time I read it, it literally makes me feel good. And yeah, so there's just like a consistent theme throughout my work, I think, of like thinking about bodies, thinking about authority, and thinking about how fundamentally, whether you are in a positive social position or a negative social position, that relationship between authorities and bodies is fundamentally one which we need to be talking about, which we need to be reconsidering, and ideally, we need to be completely dismantling, right? And that's something I feel like I'm continually coming to over and over again in my games. And it's something that I don't see a lot in a lot of other games. A lot, especially role-playing games, are so mind heavy. And even when you're embodying a character, you're meant to be putting on a voice or you know, thinking really intellectually about what does this person want? How are they going to do this and that? And that's all great. And I really think that we need to be looking more at embodiment, not just as a means of like making the game immersive, which is not something I'm terribly concerned with, but in bringing our bodies back to play. In a way that is not competitive, in a way that is not about striving for success and excellence, but is about renegotiating these boundaries. And likewise, I'm also really interested in creating work that's really investigating what are these boundaries between individuals? Where do you stop and where do I end? We've lived through the COVID-19 pandemic. It's impossible to pretend anymore that we're not all connected through all of these holes in our bodies, right? Like if you sneeze, that's the reality for me and my body. And at a certain point, you have to start asking yourself, are these distinctions between the self and other really serving us? Or do they create a sort of plausible deniability for us to pretend that our actions don't have the consequences for ourselves and others that they so clearly do when we're being honest with ourselves?
This has been absolutely fascinating. So many things I like that you said there that really kind of you know, just kind of, I feel like I've got thoughts and questions as, you know, buzzing and bubbling right now. It's it's a shame that we're running out of time. But oh god, I mean, I really like. Just interesting that you talked about embodiment there, and that point that you made about in Pursuit, where like the kind of the physical lived reality of being the person who has given someone else the game to play has a material impact on how you're going to experience it and what your position is within that experience. I think that is incredibly inspiring and thought provoking, and I think it's sort of it is embodiment that goes beyond the physical. It is the difference between the you and the me. That's and to bring that into the play experience, and I think this is the a big theme that I've seen in everything that you put out, including the Sentient Severed Arm, is this sense that the experience lives beyond the kind of what is given to you on the paper sheet. What the instructions are, what the rules are. It's
who we are is a designable surface, right? And we are designing that every day, and we can accept help in those regards. Honestly, not only are we designing that every day, but there are teams of experts working every day to design us against our will, to create versions of us that aren't what we ever wanted us to be. And I'm really interested in work that is about thinking about those designs acting on us, thinking about whether those are things that we want to bring into ourselves, or whether those are things that we need to reject, and what does that rejection entail, are really questions that I'm interested in exploring.
Well, thank you so much for this discussion. This has been
absolutely
fascinating. Where can we find out more about your work?
I am on Blue Sky. You can find me by searching for Harper Ferry. I am on itch.io under Null and Void Games. And I have a website, which is nullandvoidgames.com. It is in progress, but it's there. And I am more than happy. Oh, I also have a Tumblr, which is nullandvoidgames.tumblr.com. I'm really happy to interact with people on any of those platforms. I am really happy for this opportunity because I enjoy talking about my work. I enjoy pontificating. And if anybody who watches this video wants to come find me and give me more opportunities to talk about my work and pontificate, that would be beautiful.
Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this chat. It's been fantastic. Indiecade viewers, keep an eye on this channel because we will have more interviews coming up, and during the festival you can try out a lot of the games that have been nominated this year. Harper, once again, congratulations on the nomination, congratulations on the Developer's Choice Award, and well done on making something that is fascinating, special, thought-provoking, and has clearly resonated with a lot of people here at Indiecade.
Thank you so much. It's a huge joy, and congratulations again to you as well.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind. Thank you. Well, we shall see you all again soon. Have yourselves a fantastic day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.